The night Sicily broke him was heavy with thunder. Lightning clawed across the sky, white veins tearing open a ceiling of black clouds. Wind pushed through the olive groves like a restless spirit, and the sea below the cliff roared in warning to the Romano villa. Lanterns swung on their hooks, their light trembling against marble pillars slick with rain. 9-year-old Luca Romano crouched behind one of those pillars, the stone cold against his cheek. His small hands pressed over his ears, but the sound still found him. The shouts, the boots, the sobbing of servants dragged out into the storm. His father had always told him that power meant control, that men who shouted were already afraid. Yet the courtyard was filled with shouting now, and Luca's father knelt in the center of it. Don Giovanni Romano was still in his dinner clothes, the white shirt stained dark at the collar where someone had struck him. His gold signet ring, an heirloom of the Romano bloodline, glimmered each time lightning flashed. Surrounding him were a dozen men in black coats, guns drawn, the barrels steaming in the rain. And then came Don Emilio Cruz. He didn't need to raise his voice. His calm carried more weight than any bullet. He walked slowly, umbrella balanced on his shoulder, eyes almost gentle as they swept the ruined garden. "This land belongs to order," he said, voice smooth enough to slice marble. "And order belongs to me." Luca's father spat blood into the mud. "Order dies with tyrants," he answered. The words low but firm. Emilio's smile barely moved. He lifted his gun, an old Beretta with the Cruz crest engraved on the handle, and aimed. Rain hissed as it hit the metal. Luca's breath caught. He wanted to scream, to run, to throw himself between them. But his legs were locked in stone. Giovanni turned his head, eyes finding the shadows where his son hid. For a heartbeat, father and child shared silence across the chaos. Then Giovanni whispered the last thing his son would ever hear from him. "Never kneel, Luca. Not even when you're dying." The gun fired. The sound cracked through the storm, scattered the crows nesting on the roof. They rose like smoke into the sky. Giovanni's body collapsed forward, arms open as though he meant to embrace the earth. The red blooming beneath him spread fast, washing through puddles that mirrored the lightning. Luca's hands fell from his ears. He stared at the body, at the ring still shining on a lifeless hand. Every sound in the world seemed to disappear. The storm kept roaring, but inside him, everything went silent. When the cars finally left, carrying Emilio and his men into the distance, Luca stepped out from behind the pillar. The rain soaked through his nightshirt as he crossed the courtyard barefoot. He knelt beside his father's body, fingers trembling as they brushed the cold skin. "I'll never forgive them," he whispered. "Never." The words vanished into thunder, but the vow stayed. Morning came gray and sickly. The house was stripped, paintings gone, safes emptied, servants vanished. Luca hid in the wine cellar until silence convinced him the monsters had truly left. He was alone in a mansion that smelled of smoke and iron. By afternoon, a black car arrived. From it stepped Alfredo, his father's most loyal capo. The man's suit was torn, his left eye purple. When he found Luca in the cellar, he didn't speak. He simply pulled the boy into his arms and whispered, "We have to disappear." That night they fled Palermo. The villa behind them burned until the hill glowed red. Years later, Naples, Italy, the memory of that night never left Luca. It carved him into the man he became. At 16 he could dismantle a gun blindfolded. At 18 he learned the art of interrogation. Silence, then precision. By 21, his name whispered through the underworld as a rumor. Il Fantasma, the ghost. He killed without hesitation, never leaving a trace, never repeating a mistake. Alfredo raised him like a weapon. "Feelings are debts," the old man would say. "And debts will get you killed." Luca believed it. Until the day he stopped believing anything. Now at 28. He stood in a candlelit church in Naples that doubled as a sanctuary for the remaining Romano loyalists. Stained glass bled red light onto the floor. At the altar waited Don Sergio Morello, a gray-haired consigliere who had once served Luca's father. Sergio slid a black envelope across the marble altar. "Your next contract," he said. "Direct from America. High payment. Clean job." Luca didn't reach for it immediately. His gloved hand hovered above the wax seal stamped with a foreign crest. "Who's the target?" he asked, voice low, detached. Sergio met his eyes. "Her name is Isabella Cruz." The name hit harder than any bullet. Cruz. Luca's jaw tightened. Somewhere deep, the thunder of his childhood returned. Sergio continued, unaware, or pretending not to notice, the tremor in Luca's stillness. "Daughter of Don Emilio Cruz. Lives in New York. Philanthropist. Runs an art foundation that launders family money through galleries. The client wants it finished quietly." Luca broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet inside. A photograph slipped out. Black and white, elegant. A young woman in a white dress standing beneath a marble arch, wind catching strands of her hair. Her eyes, even in grayscale, seemed alive. He studied the photo longer than he should have, not because of her beauty, but because something in her expression, some strange calm, didn't belong to the world that had built men like him. "Do you accept?" Sergio asked. Luca folded the paper carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and nodded once. "Yes." Outside, the streets of Naples glimmered under sodium light. He walked alone, coat collar high, cigarette burning between his fingers. The smoke curled into the night like ghosts. He had waited 20 years for justice. Now it wore the face of a woman he'd never met. But vengeance has a way of changing shape, and in Luca's shadow, fate had already begun to move. The airport at Capodichino was a sleepless machine, its lights humming like neon confessionals for men who carried sins in their suitcases. Luca moved through it without sound. Black coat, forged passport, no expression. He had lived so long inside other names that the one printed on his ticket felt as thin as smoke. Leon Rossi. Tourist. Photographer. A lie with a perfect smile. He watched the crowd as he waited in line. Families laughing, lovers whispering, children dragging tiny bags that squeaked across the tiles. All of them moving toward destinations that still had meaning. He had none. Only coordinates. When his flight was called, he boarded last. The attendant's greeting, "Buona sera, Signor Rossi," was the softest sound he'd heard in weeks. He nodded once, took the window seat, and let the city fall away beneath him as the plane clawed into the clouds. Outside, lightning flashed over the Tyrrhenian Sea. He closed his eyes and saw Palermo again. The pillar, the rain, his father's ring glinting in the mud. He pressed his thumb against the scar on his palm, the one Alfredo had burned there years ago to remind him of loyalty. It still throbbed when he thought of vengeance. The JFK at night was another kind of storm. Louder, brighter, built of concrete and impatience. Customs cleared him in minutes. The papers were flawless. New York swallowed him whole. That a black sedan waited outside, engine running. The driver never spoke. Inside the glove compartment was a burner phone and a note written in precise Italian script. "Watch before you strike." Luca's lips curved slightly. Orders from Rome, maybe. Or from someone who liked riddles. Either way, the message meant time to observe the prey. He checked into a small apartment in Brooklyn Heights, the kind of place where no one asked questions if you paid in cash. The view overlooked the East River and the glittering towers of Manhattan. Steel giants that hid every secret imaginable. He spent the first night assembling his tools, dismantling and reassembling his handgun, scanning the blueprints of the Cruz Foundation building, memorizing exits, guards, and surveillance patterns on the wall. He pinned the photograph of Isabella Cruz. The grayscale eyes seemed to look back at him through the shadows. He didn't like that. He turned the picture face down. 3 days later at dawn, he found her. The Cruz Art Foundation stood on Fifth Avenue, all glass and ivory stone, a temple built to cleanse a family's bloodline through beauty. From the cafe across the street, Luca watched through tinted windows. Isabella arrived in a silver car, hair pinned loosely, coffee in hand. No guards, no fear. She spoke to the doorman with the ease of someone untouched by danger. When she smiled, the world around her seemed to pause, as if it too forgot what darkness looked like. He told himself it was an illusion. Everyone had a weakness, even angels. But as she entered the building, light spilling around her like spilled gold, Luca realized something unsettling. For the first time in his life, he hesitated to follow. The morning bled into gray drizzle. Fifth Avenue shimmered with reflections of umbrellas and car lights. Luca sat at the cafe window again. Same table, same cup of untouched espresso gone cold. Across the street, Isabella's world unfolded like clockwork. She greeted the janitor first, always with a smile. She carried a sketchbook under her arm, not a designer handbag. She bent to pick up a child's dropped toy on the sidewalk, every motion quiet, precise, unaware that death was watching her breathe. Luca studied patterns. Her arrival time, the rhythm of her steps, the way her security detail never lingered more than a few minutes after she entered, he catalogued them all. Observation was faith to him. Then she looked up, directly toward the cafe window for a moment. The space between them vanished. Her gaze didn't hold suspicion. It held curiosity, as though she'd sensed not a hunter but a memory standing there. Luca's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. Heat bit into his palm, grounding him. He lowered his eyes before she could see too much, before the old wound inside him could remember what innocence looked like. When he looked up again, she was gone. Only the revolving door of glass, spinning slowly, catching the light like the face of a clock counting down. That night, rain returned. The city wore its neon like scars, bright bleeding color down wet asphalt. Luca followed Isabella's driver from the foundation to a gala downtown. He stayed a block behind, invisible among the taxis. Inside the hotel ballroom, chandeliers hung like frozen fire. The rich moved among them, laughing the way only the untouchable could. He slipped in through the service entrance, the scent of champagne and perfume colliding in the air. She stood near the center, white gown shimmering like light underwater. Art patrons gathered around her, listening as she spoke about healing through creation. The irony wasn't lost on him. Then a photographer stumbled, bumping her shoulder. She turned, eyes sweeping the room, and met his. Recognition flickered. Not of who he was, but of the face she'd seen that morning in the cafe reflection. Her brows knit for a second. She smiled politely, maybe out of instinct, maybe out of interest. Either way, it was a doorway he hadn't planned on before he could retreat. She crossed the room. "Do I know you?" she asked. The accent was soft, mid-Atlantic, the kind that made every syllable sound deliberate. He forced a slight smile. "You must be mistaken." She tilted her head, searching his face. "Maybe. But you look like someone who sees too much." Then her assistant called her, breaking the spell. She excused herself, leaving him with that one sentence echoing in his mind. Someone who sees too much. Luca turned toward the exit, heart steady but breath uneven. For the first time in years, the mission line had blurred, just enough for him to feel it. The rain had stopped by the time Luca reached the safe house, a dim apartment above a shuttered pawnshop in East Harlem. The air smelled of rust and wet concrete. He locked the door, removed his jacket, and sat before a bare table. On it lay a single phone, untraceable, encrypted, a lifeline he both needed and despised. He dialed a coded number. 3 rings. Then silence. Finally, a voice rasped through static. "Status. Target located," Luca said. "Routine verified. Security minimal. No suspicion. Proceed." He hesitated a second too long. "She's different. The file doesn't match the person." Then the voice sharpened. "Clarify. She's involved in charity work. Not front organizations, real ones. Clean. No shell accounts, no laundering. I've checked." "Luca," the voice said, almost amused. "You're not hired to audit morality. You're hired to finish what's started." Static buzzed like a warning. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling where a bulb flickered in lazy rhythm. "Who's the client?" he asked quietly. Silence again. Then, "Irrelevant." The line went dead. Luca sat there, the phone heavy in his hand. He had worked too long to ask questions, but something about this assignment was off. The girl wasn't hiding evil. She was running from it. He opened the old file again. Her last name wasn't just Moretti. It was Isabella Moretti Russo, daughter of Giovanni Russo, the man who'd ordered the hit that took Luca's parents 20 years ago. The air left his lungs. Every nerve burned. The world tilted in quiet rage. He finally understood why the name had haunted him, why the mission felt personal before he even knew why. He whispered to the empty room. "Giovanni's daughter." Outside, thunder rolled again, distant but deliberate, as if the storm had only been waiting for him to remember. He didn't sleep that night. The city whispered below, a lullaby for the damned t 2 a.m. A shadow moved outside the window. Deliberate, practiced, Luca reached for his gun. Safety off. He waited. A knock, soft, patterned. 2 short, 1 long. Only one person used that signal. He opened the door. A woman in a trench coat slipped in, rain dripping from her hat brim. Eyes dark, sharp, calculating. "Still working alone in the dark," she said. Her voice carried the faint lilt of Rome. "Didn't know you were still alive, Serena." He smirked. "You say that every time you see me." They had history, tangled and bitter. Once partners, once lovers, now ghosts. Serena dropped a folder on the table. "That's your target's real file. The one your employers didn't send." Luca frowned. "Why bring me this?" "Because you're being set up." He opened the folder. Inside were surveillance photos, not of Isabella, but of him. His chest tightened. "What the hell is this?" "They're not cleaning the girl, Luca. They're cleaning you." She leaned closer, eyes steady. "Someone wants both of you gone. And the girl, she doesn't even know she's the bait." Thunder cracked outside, closer now. Luca stared at the photos. His own face caught through sniper lenses. His entire life condensed into a single word stamped at the top of the file. Terminate. Morning came slow and gray again, the kind of sky that felt like it was watching. Luca had been up all night, replaying Serena's words until they became a heartbeat. "They're cleaning you too." He burned the fake ID in the sink, watched its edges curl and blacken, the letters of his name disappearing into ash. Then he did what he had promised himself never to do. He broke protocol. He went to find the girl. The cafe opened early. Steam rose from the espresso machine, wrapping Isabella in curls of silver haze as she arranged fresh lilies in a jar by the window. She hummed softly, unaware of the man crossing the street toward her. The bell above the door chimed once. Her song stopped. Luca stepped inside, dripping from the rain. He looked like someone who had walked through war and left part of himself behind. "Cappuccino," she offered with a smile that came from habit, not trust. He nodded, voice low. "Black. No sugar." She turned, hands steady as she worked. But when she set the cup down, their fingers brushed. A shock, brief and electric. "You were at the gala," she said. "And the cafe. You following me?" He didn't answer. His eyes scanned the street outside, the rooftops, the reflection on the glass. Then he leaned forward and spoke so quietly she almost missed it. "Don't go home tonight." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me. Don't. Just listen to me. Who are you? The only one still trying to keep you alive." He slid a small flash drive across the table. "Play this somewhere safe. And when you see what's on it, run." Before she could speak, he was already gone, swallowed by the rain and the rush of morning traffic. She stood there, pulse racing, staring at the tiny piece of metal gleaming under the cafe lights, wondering whether she had just met her savior, or the man who would destroy her. The rain didn't stop all day to be nightfall. The city's neon lights shimmered across the wet pavement like scattered stars fallen to earth. Isabella sat alone in her apartment, curtains drawn, shoes still on. The flash drive lay on the table where she'd dropped it hours ago. She'd replayed the cafe scene in her mind over and over. The stranger's voice, his eyes, the strange gravity that pulled her into his words. She told herself not to look. She told herself to call the police. But curiosity, or maybe instinct, whispered otherwise. She opened her laptop, inserted the drive. A single file appeared. Truth.mp4. She clicked. Static first. Then a series of grainy videos. Surveillance footage, timestamps, locations she didn't recognize, men in suits. Warehouse lights. Briefcases exchanged, and then, her father Giovanni Russo, her father the philanthropist. But in the footage he wasn't donating. He was negotiating. "Shipment arrives tomorrow." "No witnesses," he said coldly, voice distant yet familiar. Her breath hitched. Another clip showed him with men she'd seen on the news. People linked to organized crime. She watched as he signed documents, as money passed hands, as someone screamed off camera. And then she saw the name. Moretti Foundation. Her foundation. Her name written beside blood. The room spun. No, that can't be real," she whispered. She paused the video, trembling. But when she looked closer, she saw a date in the corner. 2 weeks ago. That meant it wasn't old. It was current. She felt the world collapse into silence, her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the laptop. Every speech she'd ever given about hope, every donation she'd ever raised, it was all tainted. A cover. And that man from the cafe, he knew. A sudden noise, footsteps in the hallway. She froze, staring at the door. The peephole darkened, someone was there. "Miss Moretti," a man's voice called. Too calm. "This is building security. There's been a power outage. We need you to step outside." Her instincts screamed. She closed the laptop quietly and slipped toward the back door. The handle rattled. Then the voice again, this time firmer. "Miss Moretti, open up." She grabbed her bag, the flash drive, and slipped through the service exit into the stairwell. She descended. She heard the lock snap. Then another voice, muffled, male, cold, say, "She's gone. Check the alley." Her heart pounded as she pushed open the basement door and ran into the storm, unaware that someone else was already waiting there. A car engine idled at the curb. The passenger door opened, Luca's voice. "Get in." For the first time, she didn't question. She just obeyed. The rain came harder, drumming against the windshield like 1,000 impatient hands. Luca drove without headlights for 3 blocks, letting the darkness swallow them before flicking them back on. Isabella sat rigid in the passenger seat, soaked to the skin, eyes fixed on the blurred city rushing past. Her voice trembled when it finally came. "Who are you?" "Someone who made the same mistake you did," Luca said. "What mistake is that?" "Trusting the wrong people." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the shadows beneath his eyes, the scar along his jaw, the quiet way he scanned every mirror as if danger lived in the reflection. "You're the one who gave me that video," she said. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. The wipers squeaked once, twice. "Because you were supposed to die tonight," he said at last. Her breath hitched. "What?" "Your father's partners think you know too much. They sent me to erase you." She pressed back against the seat. "So what changed?" "You smiled," he said simply. She stared at him, disbelief warring with fear. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." The car turned sharply into a narrow service road beneath the freeway. The noise above them muffled the sound of pursuit. Luca slowed, killed the lights again. "We'll lay low here for a while." "I can't just disappear," Isabella said. "People will look for me. Not the kind of people you want finding you." She folded her arms, anger rising now that the initial shock had passed. "So what, I'm supposed to just trust you? The man who admits he was sent to kill me?" He looked at her then, eyes tired but steady. "I haven't earned your trust," he said quietly. "But I'll earn your survival." Silence stretched between them, heavy as the rain. Finally she whispered, "Who are they?" Luca exhaled. "The consortium. A network your father helped build. They run money, politics, cities. And when someone steps out of line, they disappear," she finished. He nodded, a beat. Then she asked, almost a whisper, "Why help me?" He hesitated, then said the first honest thing in years. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted by his ghosts." He started the engine again, merging back onto the deserted highway ahead. Lightning split the horizon, briefly illuminating their faces. 2 strangers bound by blood, lies, and the kind of fear that can turn into something far more dangerous. They drove for hours, leaving the city behind. The skyline faded into mist, swallowed by the rain. By dawn, the road had turned to gravel, the kind that crackled beneath tires like old bones. A small cabin sat at the edge of the woods, forgotten, silent, wrapped in fog. Luca parked the car behind it and killed the engine. "Where are we?" Isabella asked, arms wrapped around herself. "Off the grid," he said. "No signal, no eyes, no ears." The place smelled of pine and cold dust. A wood stove stood in the corner, half buried under old blankets. Luca struck a match, coaxing fire from reluctant wood. Isabella stood by the window, watching dawn crawl across the trees. Her reflection looked like someone she didn't recognize, the daughter of a man she no longer understood. Finally, she turned to him. "You said you were sent to kill me. Who sent you? He didn't answer right away. The fire cracked softly, casting golden light on his face, the first warmth either of them had seen in days. You don't want the name, he said. I think I deserve it. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Your father. The silence that followed was suffocating. She blinked once, then twice, as though her mind refused to let the words make sense. My father's dead. No, Luca said quietly. He staged that. He's alive and very much in control. The foundation was his shield. You were his alibi. She backed away, shaking her head. You're lying. I wish I was. He tossed her a small envelope. Photos spilled across the table. Recent ones. Giovanni Russo, alive, stepping out of black cars, shaking hands with men whose faces she'd seen on police briefings. Her voice broke. Why would he want me dead? Because you're clean. You're the only piece of his empire that isn't stained. And that makes you dangerous. Tears stung her eyes, but she fought them back. Then why didn't you finish the job? Luca stared into the fire. Because killing you would have been like killing the last good thing left in this world. The words hung there, raw and unguarded. She looked at him, this stranger who should have been her executioner, and for the first time she didn't see a threat. She saw a man who'd lost more than he could ever say. He stood, heading toward the door. Get some rest. We move again at night. She called after him, voice trembling but steady. Luca, who are you really? He paused, hand on the doorknob, his silhouette framed by firelight. The son of the man your father killed. And then he stepped outside into the cold morning, leaving her with nothing but the sound of crackling fire and the weight of a truth too heavy to breathe. The woods were still except for the whisper of rain dripping from pine needles. Luca stood a few feet from the cabin, cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers, a habit he'd buried years ago but always found again when ghosts returned inside. He could still hear the faint crackle of the fire and the occasional creak of floorboards as Isabella paced. He wanted to believe the silence meant safety, but silence in his world usually meant something was coming. He took out his phone, the encrypted one Serena had given him, and dialed a number burned into muscle memory. Talk, a voice said on the second ring. It's done, Luca lied. A pause. Verification. She drowned in the river. No body. The voice chuckled. You always were efficient. The client will be pleased. Luca ended the call, dropped the phone in the mud, and crushed it under his boot. The lie was fragile, temporary, but it might buy them a few days. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. He turned quickly, hand instinctively brushing the gun at his side. Isabella stood in the doorway, barefoot, wrapped in one of the old blankets. You lie like it hurts, she said softly. He stared at her, caught between guilt and survival. You shouldn't be out here. You shouldn't be lying for me. She stepped closer, rain misting her hair. I heard everything, she continued. You told them I was dead. Why? Because if they think you're alive, they'll keep coming. Her eyes filled, but not with fear this time, with something sharper, more human. You could have walked away. You should have. Why didn't you? He hesitated, then exhaled a breath that sounded like confession. Because I remember what it felt like to lose everything, he said quietly. And I can't let you feel that too. Lightning flared through the trees, and for a heartbeat their faces were illuminated. His worn and haunted, hers fragile but fierce. She looked up at him. Then what happens now? Luca's jaw tightened. Now we disappear. But there's one person we need first. Who? Serena. She knows how to reach your father. The next night, the storm broke. Thunder rolled across the sky like cannon fire as Luca drove them through winding backroads, headlights cutting thin blades of light through the fog. Neither spoke much. The air between them carried words unsaid, questions too dangerous to ask, answers that might break them both. Finally, Isabella whispered, Where are we meeting her? An old freight terminal by the river. Serena said it's clear. Can you trust her? He hesitated, a pause too long. No, he said honestly. But she's all we've got. The terminal loomed like a ghost. Steel ribs and shattered windows, wind whistling through its hollow bones. Luca parked behind a stack of rusted containers. Inside, Only one light burned, a swinging bulb above a wooden table. Serena waited there, trench coat damp, hair slicked back. Her gun rested on the table beside a small black case. "You made good time," she said. Her eyes flicked to Isabella. "And you brought the princess." "Careful," Luca warned. Serena smirked. "Relax. I'm not here to collect bounties. Yet." Isabella stepped forward, voice trembling but steady. "You said you could get to my father." "I can," Serena said, opening the case. Inside were forged passports, stacks of cash, 2 burner phones. "But it'll cost." Luca frowned. "Since when do you charge for justice?" "Since justice stopped paying," she shot back. Then her tone softened. "Luca, you don't understand. The consortium doesn't just want her gone, they want you erased. You've become the liability." "I know," he said quietly. "I found the file." Serena exhaled, almost relieved. "Then you know what we're up against." But before Luca could answer, a faint metallic click echoed from the shadows above. He looked up, too late. Spotlights blazed to life, dozens of armed men poured in through every side, black-clad, rifles raised. "Drop it!" someone shouted. Luca grabbed Isabella, pushing her down behind a crate. Bullets shattered concrete, sparks spraying like fireworks. He turned toward Serena, but she was already moving away, slipping behind a steel beam with her gun drawn. "Serena!" he yelled. "What did you do?" She met his eyes, cold and regretful. "I made a deal," she said. "One life for 2. The betrayal hit harder than the gunfire. Luca fired back, hitting the lights. Darkness swallowed the terminal. He pulled Isabella close, whispering, "Stay down. Whatever happens, don't move." She clutched his jacket, whispering back, "You can't fight them all. Watch me." Then he rose, one man against a storm of bullets, moving like a ghost through the dark. When the last shell casing hit the ground, silence returned. The air smelled of smoke and iron. But Serena was gone, and Luca was bleeding. Gunfire faded into the distance. The rain returned. Softer now, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the wreckage left behind. Isabella crawled from behind the crate, heart hammering. The air smelled like gunpowder and blood. "Luca," she whispered. He was slumped against a steel beam, one hand pressed to his side. Blood darkened his shirt, spreading fast. She rushed to him, dropping to her knees. "No, no, no, stay with me." "I'm fine," he murmured, though his voice was fading. "You need to move, Serena. She sold us out." "I'm not leaving you." She tore a strip from her blouse and pressed it to the wound. He hissed in pain. "You don't even know me," he said, forcing a grim smile. "I know enough," she snapped, eyes wet. "You saved me. That's enough." Thunder cracked again, close enough to shake the floor. Somewhere outside, an engine roared, Serena's car speeding away into the night. That Luca's breathing grew shallow. He reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly strong despite the blood. "If I don't make it." "Don't you dare," she cut him off. "You're not dying here." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. "You're stubborn. Learned from the best." For a long moment neither spoke. The world outside could have ended and they wouldn't have noticed. Just rain and breath, and the quiet thud of 2 hearts trying to outlive fate. Finally she whispered, "I saw what he did, my father. I saw everything. You were right." He looked up at her through half-lidded eyes. "You believe me now?" She nodded, tears falling freely. "I believe you. And I'll make him pay for what he did. To your family, to mine, to everyone." He smiled faintly, eyes glassy. "That's what I was afraid of." "What do you mean?" His head leaned back, the fight in him flickering. "When revenge starts, it doesn't stop." She pressed her forehead to his, desperate. "Then I'll stop it. I'll stop him." Outside, the rain began to slow. Dawn crept along the edge of the shattered windows, touching the scene with faint light. For the first time since this nightmare began, Isabella felt something fragile stir in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something close. Luca opened his eyes again, barely whispering, "You have to drive. There's a clinic on Route 9. Go now." She nodded, tears streaking her face, helping him to his feet. "I'll get you there," she said. "I swear it." He gave her one last faint smirk. You talk like someone who means it. She looked at him, jaw tight. I do. And together, bleeding and broken but unyielding, they vanished into the morning mist. Two fugitives bound now by blood, betrayal, and something dangerously close to love for a moment. He couldn't move. His body felt like lead, stitched and bandaged. His ribs wrapped tight. Then, a familiar voice cut through the haze. You're awake. Isabella sat beside the bed, eyes rimmed red from exhaustion. Her hair was a tangled mess, and her clothes, his jacket now draped over her shoulders, were stained with dried blood. How long? He rasped. 2 days. Her tone was clipped, controlled, but her hands trembled as she poured water into a glass. You almost died on me. He took the glass, wincing. Wouldn't be the first time. She glared. You think this is funny? Luca studied her for a long moment. The fire in her eyes wasn't the same as before. This wasn't fear anymore. This was purpose. What happened after? I got you here, she said quietly. The doctor didn't ask questions. I paid him to keep quiet. He exhaled slowly. Good. Because if the Rossetti men track us, they won't, she interrupted. I destroyed your car, burned it, left the plates in the river. A shadow of a smile crossed his lips. You learn fast. I had to. Silence filled the room again. Only the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Then Isabella spoke, voice low. Serena called my father. Luca's jaw tightened. Of course she did. He knows where we were headed. He's hunting us now, not just for what you did, but because I helped you. He turned to her slowly, eyes dark as midnight. Then you're in this now, whether you want to be or not. Her gaze didn't flinch. I already am. He saw something then. Something he hadn't seen since his brother was alive. The spark of someone who'd crossed the point of no return. You don't understand, Luca said after a pause. Once you start this life, there's no peace. Only ghosts. I already have ghosts, she said. Now I want justice. He let out a dry laugh. Justice. The Mafia doesn't do justice, Isabella. It does vengeance. Then I'll learn that too, she shot back. The doctor came in. A quiet old man, face weary but kind. He'll recover if he rests. But no stress, no travel. Luca nodded faintly, but his mind was already elsewhere. He wasn't thinking of rest. He was thinking of the men he'd lost, and the storm that was coming when the doctor left. Isabella looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but thunder rolled in the distance. They'll come for us, she said softly. They will, Luca replied. But they'll regret it. His voice was cold again, the voice of a man who'd killed to survive. Then softer he added, You should have left when you had the chance. She turned back to him, eyes burning. And live knowing I let you die. I couldn't. Their eyes locked, hers trembling but fierce. 6 months later. Venice, Italy. The city glittered with wealth and sin, where every mask hid a monster and every whisper held a threat. The top floor of the Voluto Hotel, a woman in black stood by the glass wall, overlooking the canal. Her hair was longer now, darker. The softness in her eyes had vanished, replaced by quiet fire. Isabella Castelli was no longer the daughter of a fallen empire. She was the empire behind her. Marco, her most trusted guard, entered quietly. The Rossetti have agreed to your terms. The docks and the northern routes are yours again. Good. She turned slightly, her tone calm but lethal. And the syndicate in Naples. They've requested a meeting. She smiled faintly, swirling the glass of red wine in her hand. Of course they have. She walked to the desk and signed a document. Her father's old insignia now replaced with her own. A phoenix rising from fire. Marco hesitated. Do you ever wonder if he would have approved of all this? She looked up sharply. My father built an empire of fear. I'll build one of control. There's a difference. He nodded and stepped back. And Luca. Her hand froze midair. That name. That ghost. That wound that never healed. He's gone, she said coldly, setting the pen down. Let the dead rest. But the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Later that night, she walked along the balcony, the moonlight glinting off the silver pendant at her neck. Luca's last gift. She clutched it absently, lost in memory, until Marco burst through the door. "Signora, you need to see this." He handed her a sealed envelope. No name, just a wax symbol. 2 crossed daggers. Her blood ran cold. She tore it open. Inside was a simple black card, no words, no signature. Just a line of coordinates, and one phrase, written in Luca's handwriting. "You took my war. Now take what's left of me." The glass fell from her hand and shattered. The coordinates led her deep into the outskirts of Rome, an abandoned villa once owned by the Rossetti family. She arrived alone, her gun drawn, her pulse sharp in her ears. The wind howled through broken windows. Every creak sounded like a memory. Then she heard it. The low hum of a generator light flickered from a room at the end of the hall. She stepped closer, her breath trembling inside. A projector was running, looping an old recording. Her and Luca, laughing in the garden of the Castelli estate. Her knees went weak. "Luca," she whispered behind her. A shadow moved. "Careful," came that voice, deeper, rougher, but unmistakable. "You might wake the ghosts." She turned, and there he was, alive, different, scarred. Half his face bore a long cut. His eyes colder than she remembered. But it was him. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then Isabella's gun lifted. "You lied to me. I had to. You made me believe you were dead." He stepped closer, calm, unreadable. "If I hadn't, you'd never have become what you are now." Her breath shook. "You used me." He smiled faintly, the same dangerous curve that once melted her heart. "No, I freed you. You burned my world to the ground. And you rebuilt it." Her finger hovered on the trigger, tears brimming. "Why send for me now?" "Because," he said softly, stepping into the light, "the war isn't over." The silence between them was heavy. The projector hummed in the background, casting fleeting images of their younger selves across the cracked walls. Ghosts of a love too dangerous to die. Isabella's hand trembled around the gun. Luca's shadow fell across her face as he took another step closer. "I know what you're thinking," he murmured. "But this isn't about us anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "Then what is it about?" He reached into his coat and threw a folder onto the table. It slid open, revealing photos. Men in suits, powerful faces she recognized too well. The heads of the Eastern Syndicate, the supposed allies of her father's empire. "They've been pulling the strings," Luca said. "Long before your father's death. Before my exile. Before us." She stared at the photos. One of them showed Marco, her right-hand man, shaking hands with one of the syndicate leaders. Her chest tightened. "You're lying," she whispered. "I wish I was." He leaned against the wall, the old pain flickering behind his eyes. "They set us both up. The deal that killed your father. It wasn't me, Isabella. I was framed." Her pulse raced. "You expect me to believe that after everything?" "Believe what you want," he said darkly. "But if you walk out that door, they'll kill you before sunrise." She stared at him. Every instinct screamed to pull the trigger, but her heart refused. "Why now, Luca?" she demanded. "Why come back after all this time?" He exhaled slowly. "Because I found out who ordered the hit on your father. And it wasn't me." "Then who?" He hesitated. His jaw clenched, his voice barely a whisper. "Your uncle, Don Riccardo Castelli." Her world tilted. "No," she breathed. "He raised me." "He raised you to take control of your father's empire once he was gone. He wanted power, Isabella, and he used your grief to build it." She stepped back, her chest heaving. "You're lying." Luca grabbed her wrist suddenly and placed her hand on his chest. "Feel that. That's the only truth I've got left." Her eyes filled with tears. The warmth of his heartbeat, the same one she thought she'd buried years ago. "Come with me," he said. "We can end this together." She pulled her hand away, torn between rage and longing. "And if I say no?" He met her gaze. "Then you'll die fighting the wrong enemy." Back at her headquarters, Isabella's mind was chaos. She paced across her office, Luca's words echoing in her head. Marco entered quietly, his usual calm demeanor now oddly stiff. "You look troubled, Signora. Something wrong?" She studied him carefully. "How long have you known the truth?" He froze. "What truth?" "That my father's death wasn't random. That the syndicate's been controlling everything. That you have been working with them." His face darkened. "Who told you that?" "You didn't deny it," she whispered, pulling her gun. Marco's lips curved slightly, a smirk. "You've grown sharper. He'd be proud. Don't you dare speak of him. You think Luca's your savior. He's just another ghost in this rotten game. I did what I had to for you. You betrayed me. I protected you," he hissed. "You wouldn't survive without me." A gunshot shattered the air. Marco staggered back, eyes wide, clutching his side. Isabella stood over him, trembling, tears streaking her cheeks. "You should have told me the truth." He fell to his knees, whispering, "You're becoming just like him." She fired again, the room fell silent. Outside, the night howled through the Venetian canals. Isabella's reflection in the window looked nothing like the woman she once was, and behind her in the doorway Luca stood, silent witness to what she'd done. She didn't turn. "He betrayed me. I know. I killed him. I saw." She finally turned, her voice breaking. "Does it ever stop hurting?" He looked at her, eyes heavy, voice low. "Not when you're one of us." The Castelli mansion had once been a sanctuary of wealth and laughter. Now, it stood like a mausoleum, echoing only with ghosts and betrayal. Isabella walked through the grand hallway, the marble floor glistening under the moonlight. Her black coat swayed as she moved, a gun hidden beneath it. Luca followed a few paces behind, his silence both protective and dangerous. Every portrait she passed seemed to watch her. Her ancestors, her father, the life she'd lost. To the end of the corridor, heavy wooden doors waited. The same doors that led to her uncle's private study. Her voice was a whisper. "He used to read me bedtime stories in this room." Luca's tone was quiet but hard. "Tonight, he'll tell you the truth." She pushed the doors open. Don Riccardo Castelli sat behind a polished desk, surrounded by candlelight and quiet power. He was older, gray-haired, but his eyes, cold and sharp, were the same ones that once smiled at her like family. "Bella," he said softly, his voice dripping with feigned warmth. "You've come home." She stepped forward. "I came for answers." He smiled faintly. "Ah, and here I thought you came to beg for forgiveness." Luca moved to her side, gun raised. "Don't play with her, Riccardo. Not tonight." The Don's gaze shifted to him, amused, calm. "The ghost returns. How poetic." Isabella's voice cut through the tension. "You ordered the hit on my father." Silenced, he didn't deny it. He just leaned back, eyes glinting. "Your father was weak. He built empires with sentiment. Love makes men stupid, Isabella. I couldn't let him ruin everything." Her jaw clenched. "You killed him for power." "I saved the family name," he corrected. "And I would have done the same for you if you'd listened." She drew her gun, hand shaking. "You don't get to speak about saving me." He sighed. "You have your father's heart. Always did. It'll be your downfall." Luca stepped forward, gun aimed directly at the Don's head. "Say another word, old man." "Go on," Riccardo sneered. "Shoot me, Luca. End the story the same way it began, with betrayal." Isabella's eyes burned. "He's not like you." "Isn't he?" the Don asked, looking at Luca. "You think she knows everything about you, boy? Tell her who you really worked for before you came crawling to my doorstep." Luca froze. "Don't," Isabella whispered, but Riccardo chuckled darkly. "Oh, she doesn't know. Of course she doesn't. The man she loves was the syndicate's favorite hitman. The one who pulled the trigger that killed her father." Isabella's breath stopped, her gun lowered. "Tell me he's lying," she whispered. Luca's silence said everything, tears welled in her eyes. You killed him." "I didn't know," Luca said quickly, desperate. I didn't know who the target was until it was too late. They used me. She stepped back, trembling. Used you? You shot my father. Because your uncle paid them to, Luca said, voice raw. He gave the order, Isabella. I was just the weapon. Her mind spun, the room fading into noise and darkness. Ricardo rose slowly, smirking. See, we're all monsters in this story. She turned her gun on him, tears streaking her cheeks. No, you are. A single shot thundered through the air. The dawn fell, blood pooled across the marble floor, glistening beneath the candles. Isabella dropped the gun, trembling violently. Luca rushed to her, grabbing her before she collapsed. I had to, she whispered, voice breaking. He took everything from me. He pulled her close. I know. She looked up at him through tears. But now, I have nothing left. He cupped her face, his own eyes glassy. You still have me. She shook her head weakly. No, Luca. You're the reason I lost it all. She tore herself from his grasp and walked into the rain, leaving him standing amid the ghosts of the past. Venice was burning. Not with flames, but with war. The syndicate moved fast after Ricardo's death. Territories clashed, loyalties fractured, and the Castelli name became both a curse and a threat. From the rooftop of an abandoned church, Isabella watched the chaos unfold below. Her empire, her father's legacy, was collapsing, and yet, deep inside, a strange calm filled her. Behind her, footsteps approached. You shouldn't be here, she said without turning. Luca's voice came low and tired. I had nowhere else to go. You should have stayed gone. He stepped beside her, watching the fires reflected in her eyes. I told you the truth. You deserved that. I deserved my father. Silence. The city screamed below them. Sirens, gunfire, betrayal. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft but venomous. All my life I fought to protect the Castelli name. Now I see it was never about honor. It was about control. And what will you do now? She turned to him, eyes cold. Burn it all down. Luca watched her. The woman he loved, the queen he created. Then I'll burn with you. She looked at him, something breaking behind her gaze. You already did. The night in Venice was soaked in blood and thunder. Rain came down in relentless sheets, drenching the city as if trying to cleanse its sins. But Venice had long forgotten redemption. Every corner echoed with the sound of chaos. Gunfire, shouting, the desperate pulse of vengeance. From the rooftop of the Castelli Tower, Isabella stood like a ghost carved from fury and loss. Below her, flames devoured the docks and smoke curled into the storm. Her empire, the one built on her father's ashes, was collapsing. The Castelli crest, a phoenix, blazed from burning banners torn by bullets. Behind her, footsteps, heavy, purposeful. Luca. He looked destroyed. His shirt soaked with blood. His jaw hard as stone, eyes glowing with the storm's reflection. A soldier of love and regret. They've breached the eastern docks, he said through his teeth. We can still break through the west if we move now. She didn't turn. Her voice was calm, dangerously calm. There's no west left to run to. He stepped closer, the rain dripping from his hair. Then we fight here. She turned finally, meeting his eyes. No fear, only exhaustion and resolve. They took everything from us, Luca. My father. My soul. She raised her pistol, cocking it with steady hands. They don't get the ashes too. He smirked, half broken. That's the woman I fell for. Lightning split the sky. Below, black syndicate cars roared into the courtyard. Doors flung open, masked men pouring out like a flood of death. The war had found its final stage. Luca loaded his gun beside her, jaw tight. You know this ends one way. I know, she whispered. But if we die as Castelli. Then came the first explosion. The tower shook to its bones. Glass shattered, alarms blared, the night screamed. Gunfire tore through the storm. Luca and Isabella moved like ghosts, covering each other, killing with grace and fury. Every hallway became a battlefield. Every breath, a gamble. They descended the marble stairwell as syndicate soldiers swarmed. Luca fired from cover, his bullets a symphony of defiance. Isabella's shots were surgical, every kill cold, clean, personal. Together they were unstoppable. The ghost and the queen. By the time they reached the lobby, blood stained the floors and smoke filled the air. Isabella's arm bled freely, but her eyes burned like wildfire. Luca kicked the main doors open. The courtyard beyond was chaos. Cars overturned. Flames rose high, and standing amid it all, unbothered, untouched, was Victor Rossetti, head of the syndicate. "Signora Castelli," Victor said, voice dripping with arrogance. "The Phoenix dies tonight." Isabella raised her gun. "You first." Before she could fire, a sniper's bullet shattered the air. Luca tackled her down. The bullet grazed his shoulder. He groaned, returning fire toward the rooftops. "They've got high ground," he shouted. "Then we take it," she hissed. "Cover me." They surged forward through bullets and fire. Luca moved like a storm, cutting through soldiers with brutal precision. Isabella charged toward Victor, her every step powered by grief, memory, and rage. When she reached him, the world slowed. Victor smiled, cruel, calm, certain. "Your father begged for mercy too." Those words ignited every wound she carried. She screamed, a raw, guttural sound, and fired .1 shot. Then another. And another. Victor staggered backward, his smirk fading until he fell lifeless into the rain-soaked marble. His blood spread in a dark river, washing through the storm. For a heartbeat, silence. Then came the sound of more syndicate boots, pounding through the smoke. Luca grabbed Isabella's hand. "There's too many." She looked at him, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Go." He shook his head. "Not without you." "Please, Luca," she said, her voice breaking. "If one of us makes it out, let it be you." He smiled, soft and shattered. "You're still giving orders." He kissed her, fierce, desperate, final, and then he turned. "Luca!" she screamed, but he was already in motion. He ran straight into the hail of bullets, fighting like the devil himself. Every gunshot a heartbeat closer to death, every move a love letter written in fire. She could do nothing but watch. Every second tore her apart. When his gun finally clicked empty, he kept swinging, barehanded, bleeding, defiant, until they cut him down. The world stopped. The syndicate soldiers turned their guns upward, toward the rooftop where Isabella stood. Her breath came in shivers. Her world, her love, her vengeance, her name, all of it burned below. She raised her gun one last time. "For my father. For him. For me." The last shot echoed across the Venetian night, and when dawn broke, the rain had stopped. Smoke curled from the ruins of the Castelli Tower. Among the ashes, two bodies lay side by side, hands touching, faces peaceful. The newspapers would later call it the end of the Castelli era. But those who truly knew whispered another name. The lovers who burned the world to rebuild it. They fought for power. They bled for revenge. But in the end, it was love that broke the rules of the underworld. Because in the world of crime, hearts are the most dangerous weapons of all. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Would you risk everything for love that defies the Mafia code? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this is Mafia Hearts, where every bullet hides a secret, and every love story leaves blood on the rose.